Hi, friends. Happy New Year. I didn't want to rush into this year. I didn't want to start with like a list of things I had to fix or accomplish. I wanted to pause and actually notice what last year asked of me. And standing inside of the beginning of a new year, I think can be so complex because, we're trying to focus on who we want to be and what we want to do and what do we want to accomplish. And sometimes I think that sets us up for frustration during the year, right? Because we make these big, impossible goals that aren't really possible when you think about it. But, I think everybody wants to go into a new year with this like, oh, it's a fresh start. We get to start all over. But I think the real problem is our nervous systems and like who we are doesn't always like understand that change, right? Like it's another day to our bodies, to our minds, to our nervous system. And I think we need to like honor and respect that and be a little bit more realistic in how we're approaching the new year as we enter into it. And I would say that one thing that really surprised me about the end of the year that I wasn't really expecting was that in a lot of ways, I felt really raw, reflecting on it because this was by far one of the hardest years of my life. From losing my grandma at the very first, very start of the new year to, having this life altering change of moving across the country and leaving some of our family behind and having our oldest, still in Ohio and our middle leave for college and our friends and kind of everything we knew is still there, still back in Ohio, and we're in this new place and it's a lot more expensive here. And I mean, obviously we knew that, but there are a lot of payoffs, and I do love a lot about California. But I think I've talked about it in another podcast, like even stepping into going to the grocery store is something that is almost overwhelming at times because I don't know where things are, and parking in California is a little bit more complicated than in the suburbs of Ohio. So, there's just been a lot of adjustments. And so as I sat down and, was reflecting on my year, I had so much pride for Sean and I in making the decision to do something scary and to make the move. I had a lot of sadness thinking about my Grams not being here and how hard this year has been without her. And also how hard it's been to adjust to not having our children here all the time. So yeah, it was a rough end to the year. And right here, if you're listening and you're feeling tired, if you're unsure or you're still also feeling tender entering this new year, I just want you to know that you are not alone in that. And when I think of this past year, I don't think about goals. I think about survival and how just showing up when things didn't feel unsteady kind of was the goal for me, right? Just one foot in front of the other, one day at a time, just keep showing up. Um, as I said, like this year, it was very unexpected. We didn't have this long term plan to move to California. It was kind of like a conversation we had when we were kind of looking at the Ohio landscape and things that we weren't happy with, and kind of saying, what would it look like to be somewhere different? And then when our middle daughter got accepted to college in California, we were like, what would California look like? And, we were like, well, let's just see. Why don't, Sean was like, well, let's apply for some jobs and see what happens. And so from that moment, it became like a mad rush then because he had a couple offers and we were able to, make the move. But then they had like an expectation of when we had to be out there. And so it was like getting the house listed, condensing all the stuff we own. Like it was just this mad dash marathon where like you didn't even have time to think about a lot of things or to like think about the fact that you're moving across the country and leaving. And so once we got here, there was a lot of unexpected things. The Black Widow in the house when we first moved in that almost had me turning around and wanting to go back to Ohio. And, just a lot of other, things that just surprised us about being out here. And so you're here and things start to settle. And then that's when you have time to like really sit with all the changes and the choices that you made, right? And it took its own toll, emotionally, especially every time family would come or go, it still does. It still hurts. It still makes me go, oh gosh, did we do the right thing? you know. But I know why we did this. And I do believe we made the choice with intentionality. Um, but this past year, it was just so hard. It was so hard and beautiful too. Like I can't leave that out. Like excuse me, every single time I go out and drive somewhere, even if it's just to the grocery store or, to Best Buy, I am amazed at the landscape and how beautiful it is to live in California. The fact that I could be in like the desert, I could be in the mountains, I could be at a beach, I could be in the farmland all within a couple hours is incredible and it's so cool. But again, it's like you choose one thing, but when you do that, there's always consequences, right? So like learning to sit with the consequences, I think, has been an interesting part of this year. Um, I think for me, the other side of that is how profoundly I changed in this last year for a lot of reasons. Um, my gram was my human and she was my person and we were so very close. And for a long time, my grandma always kept telling me, Michelle, be happy, Michelle, be happy, Michelle, be happy, Michelle, you have to put yourself first, Michelle, be happy. And I just, for years was just like, yeah, I hear you, grandma, I hear you, grandma, I hear you, grandma. But I didn't really hear her. And it wasn't until her passing and some of the late night conversations when she was cognizant that I really got what she meant. And that was that this beautiful woman had spent 96 years taking care of everybody else. And she rarely ever put herself first. And she didn't want that for me. I think she saw a lot of the same behaviors and traits of, someone who's just always giving and sacrificing and trying to hold everything together at the cost of self. And she saw that in me and she was just like, she wanted me to stop. She wanted me to also take care of me. And that doesn't mean that I can't still help others or that I'm going to stop, wanting to be there for others or, whatever. It's more about that I also need to put myself first sometimes and make sure that I'm taken care of and that I do things like move across the country because we wanted to, right? And even though that meant it not always being easy. And if, any of these kind of feelings that you're hearing are, kind of resonating with you, I just want you to know and to remind you that you're not behind in life. Like you're just human and it's okay if last year really was just about survival. And I think, again, like I said at the beginning, this year can feel really complicated. There's so much pressure to be hopeful, to be motivated, to be really clear in what you want and what you expect. But at the same time, it literally is just a new day, just another new day. And I think if we look at it in the perspective of honoring each day instead of worrying about this giant year ahead of us, that we can keep ourselves more grounded, our nervous systems more regulated, and we can keep expectations realistic. And I'm not saying in any way that doesn't mean we don't have any goals, right? Or you don't have anything that you want to accomplish this year. I'm just saying maybe keeping them smaller and attainable might be something to consider. I want to also be honest about something before I go any further. When I started this podcast, I cared a lot about getting it right. And so if you've listened to the first 14 episodes, they were very scripted. They were my scripts, but they were very scripted because I wanted to make sure I didn't rattle on, or I didn't get lost in a story, or I didn't share too much. Um, and the more I sat with that as the end of the year approached, and like kind of where I wanted this podcast to go and who I wanted to be within it, I realized that by focusing on like sounding put together or saying all of the right things, I kind of edited myself. And that's not who I want to be. Like, this podcast to me is really about showing up and being real. I don't want perfectionism to be the point. Life is messy. I could be messy. I could wander off on tangents of conversations. I lose my words when I speak. And you know what? That's just who I am, right? I don't have to be perfect. And I think I'm becoming more and more comfortable with that as I continue to spend more time sitting with myself and sitting with reflection and realizing that I am enough just as I am, right? And I really want this podcast to feel like you are walking beside me in real life. And not that it's perfect, not that I got it all together, but that we're both going to walk through this figuring things out together. Moving forward, you're going to see some scripts because I have to stay on track, right? Like, so there are parts that will always be a little scripted so that I stay on track. But there's going to be a lot more just raw, open conversation where I'm going to speak a lot more off the cuff, if you will, and to be very real and sometimes raw in moments with all of you. And I just want you to know that I'm choosing to be real, not perfect. And I hope that means a better connection with all of the people that are joining me on this journey of life. I am not here because I have it all figured out. I am here because I am living it too. This shift is a part of why I am choosing values over goals this year. I feel like, again, goals can be important, and again, there's nothing wrong with having small goals. But I think when all we do is look to achieve the next goal and the next goal, we completely miss out sometimes on the life that's being lived around us. And I feel like I've spent so many years in survival mode and just make it to the next, just make it to the next, just do the next thing, that I don't want to live that way anymore. So this year, I'm going to focus more on what's really important to me and leaning into that more. And that is my focus. And I want this podcast, as we're moving forward with this, to also offer tools, right? Like things that I've learned as a therapist and as a human in my own life. But I also want this podcast to be focused on companionship and a reminder that we are not doing life wrong just because it's not always perfect and it's a little messy. So when I think about the values for this year that I am going to hold on to and focus on, they are presence. I am so sick of myself trying to, again, rush through every part of my life just so I can get to the next thing and the next thing, or, trying to keep myself from feeling sad when I know somebody's, if they're visiting, they're going to leave. Like sometimes I withdraw and kind of pull in. Like I really want to focus more on just being present in my life. not feeling like I have to rush to have 1 million followers on TikTok or thousands of people listening to this podcast. Like just being here, just showing up and being real is the point for me. I don't want presence to feel like it's holding me back anymore, right? Like if I just fully stand in it and sit in it, that it's going to either be too much or it's going to hold me back from the next thing. Like, oh, because if I scripted this podcast and if I chose to do XYZ and everything the right way, then, oh, I might grow faster. Or if I do TikTok with this hook and caption, then, oh, it might be more real. Condense it to 7 seconds or 20 seconds. And that is not who I am as a human. Like, I deeply value connection. And so, presence it is this year. Ooh. Integrity. For me, this means more than just acting towards others. I think it's also honoring ourselves, honoring that we don't have to be small to keep the peace. We don't have to be the fixer of every single thing. We don't have to be less than so other people can feel like more. This is not going to be perfect by any means for me, because I do tend to, as a human, like lean more into shrinking a little bit so that other people are okay, right? So it might not always be ideal, but this year I think is going to be a lot more honest. Connection, like I said, this is a huge value for me. I deeply honor connection. I am a family person. I am a friend person. I am someone who has always wanted to help. And I think that's kind of how I ended up as a therapist, right? Like just the ability to help and to connect with people. And I think this year I'm going to lean more into that again, coming back to just being real, just being real, just being who I am, and not worrying about all the metrics and the data and all of that and what I think I should have done or where I should be, right? It is really just going to be about who can I connect with? Who can I help? Whose life, even if on a tiniest scale, is impacted by something I said? That is what matters to me this year. And then self-trust. Oh, this one's a hard one. I think being a teen parent changed me fundamentally. If you knew me in high school, I was outgoing and confident and I didn't let much stop me. Like I'm the one that walked up to Sean and was like, hey, I think you should take me to this Christmas dinner or a Christmas party and we should do this. I was that girl, right, who just had a lot of confidence. And being a teen mom, it made me feel so behind in that, like, I was letting other people down, or I was letting myself down, or that I was going to let this beautiful baby down, right? And I became so structured and so contained, where everything became about taking care of other humans, being the good wife, being the good mom. And that is literally who I focused on being. And I'm not saying that that by itself is a bad thing, right? Being a good mom or wanting to be a good wife. But when you wrap your entire identity around it, it's really hard later to figure out who you are as a human and then to trust yourself, right? That like you're good enough, that you know enough, that you get to just be who you are, and that's enough. So this year we're going to lean a lot more into just trusting me and trusting that I'm enough. And then care. Real care. This year I was exhausted for so many reasons because I didn't always prioritize taking care of myself. I went from losing my grandma to never really being able to sit in that grief because I was taking care of everybody else. I was helping plan their funeral arrangements. I was, planning all of it. And then from there it became about the move and then about, our kid getting off to college and Sean transitioning into his new job and, everything was kind of like this external care that I had to give. And on top of that, I have a lot of medical issues. I have chronic vertigo and some other things that make life hard just on a daily basis sometimes. And I was still dealing with the trauma of my supervisor and losing my job at the end of the year prior. And, I never had time to sit with any of this and until we ended up here without a lot of extra time, or well, too much extra time, I should say, in my mind. And I realized how much I neglected taking care of me. And so this year, I am going to focus on that as a priority and not feel guilty if that means putting my needs first sometimes. And I want to pause here, not for answers, but for noticing. What value might be standing out for you right now? And I just want you to take a minute and think about it. And now I want you to think about that value. And I want you to know that if that's just the one thing that you hold on to this year, and that is what you set your intention on, of just honoring that one value, that's enough. This year doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be incredible. It could be just enough, and that's okay. Moving forward, this podcast is going to reflect the shift in the way that I am speaking, in the way that I'm leading my life. I am committed to creating a space that is all about connection, about being honest and real, where hopefully you can learn some insights that might help you along your journey, but also know that you are not alone in this. I want you to feel seen and heard when you listen to my podcast. And I want you to know that I will be walking alongside of you as we journey through this next year together. This isn't about fixing anyone. It's about staying honest, learning as we go, and not doing it alone. I don't need this year to be impressive. I just need it to be aligned with who I am and what I want for my life. This year, I am carrying forward the intention of being real, being proud of myself, and learning to trust that who I am truly is enough. I am releasing the need to always take care of everyone else. I am releasing the need to get approval and to make myself small so that other people might like me or might listen to me. I want you all to know that this year is going to be messy, but it's going to be beautiful. What if we just took this year one honest day at a time? What if alignment counts who you want to be, even if nothing looks impressive? What if being real is enough right now? Thank you so much for joining me along this journey, and I'm going to call this Chapter 2. Season 1, Chapter 2, as we walk along, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care of yourself.